Visenya Targaryen, the first wife of Aegon the Conqueror and Queen of Westeros, was the woman who ensured that the Targaryen rule solidified in Westeros, and she laid the foundation so deep that the Targaryen dynasty lasted in Westeros for several hundred years. Fearless woman who knew how to rule, Visenya became the inspiration for many, like Arya Stark. In this video, we'll explore the origin and entire history of Queen Visenya. So without further ado, let's cut to the chase. Oh, and before we begin, if you like our content, please consider subscribing to us. It might be a small click for you, but it means a lot to us. Thanks. Let's begin. How did the Targaryens end up on Dragonstone? When Aegon Targaryen's daughter Daenerys had this powerful dream copied from Pompeii about Valyria, Aegon sold his property, packed his bag, and left Valyria to come to Dragonstone with his family, wealth, and 5 dragons. Aegon used to be a minor dragon lord in Valyria, and when he left for Dragonstone, his rival dragon lords thought he was being a coward, but the man made the best decision of his life. Daenerys saw the dream in 114 BC, and by 102 BC, Valyria was annihilated due to a series of volcanic eruptions, which was an event so bad that even dragons burned to death. Of course, Aegon and his family were safe. He became the first Lord of Dragonstone, a title that was later held by his descendants, and eventually, Aegon came to power as the Lord of Dragonstone, who had 3 children. The eldest of these was Visenya, then came Aegon, Aegon, and the last child was Rhaenys. Visenya's childhood defied custom and inspired many like Arya Stark. Visenya was born in 29 BC, and a few years later, Aegon came to the world. Since a very young age, Visenya was more into swords and dragons than embroidery and art. When Aegon started training, she would join him, and it wasn't before long that both of them became skilled warriors. However, the same can't be said about Rhaenys, the youngest of the siblings. Throughout her life, Visenya proved that she was as comfortable in ringmail as she was in silk. When she wasn't playing her role as a noblewoman, she would don armor and wield the Valyrian steel sword called Dark Sister, which was later given to Daemon by Viserys. Visenya was one of the first women in all of Westeros who defied the pre-established customs and notions. She fought and trained bravely against men and even bested many of them. All of this got recorded in the histories of Westeros and became the source of inspiration for many a young girl, including Arya Stark, who is also one of the most skilled fighters in all of House Stark. We also have Brienne of Tarth, a lady full of honor and skills. Not even the Hound could match her skills in battle, and he used to serve as the sworn sword of King Joffrey. Needless to say, it was Visenya who paved the way for these things. Although people still don't look too kindly upon women warriors and often fail to understand how to address them, had it not been for the wielder of Dark Sister, female warriors would have come much later into Westeros. Coming of age and bonding with Vhagar. When Visenya grew older, she turned into this passionate, sensual, curvaceous, and sexually attractive woman. Of course, she had the typical Valyrian features like long silver gold hair and purple eyes. She would often bind her hair in rings or braid them. She was beautiful, no doubt, but hers was an austere and harsher form of beauty. You know, something like a country girl, someone who's not really skinny and is healthy. I want to call her thick, but I'm not sure if that's something that people would find offensive. Moving on, despite her killer looks, Visenya was also an extremely unforgiving, serious, and stern young woman. She had no time for any bullshittery and was quick to anger. God help you if you found yourself at the wrong end of her sword. In fact, some even claimed that Visenya practiced dark arts and experimented with poisons. On the other hand, her younger sister Rhaenys was totally different. You could say that she was coy for a Targaryen. This makes me wonder how close these two were as sisters during their childhood. I mean, they didn't really have anything in common. Did Visenya bully Rhaenys? Was she protective of her? The books don't say anything in this regard, so I suppose we'll never know. But there are talks about another spin-off about Aegon's conquest of Westeros. So yeah, that show, if it comes to life, might throw some light upon their childhood. It wasn't long after that Visenya and Aegon got married, which was of course the norm. You know, like keeping the bloodline pure and all that. To be honest, I've worked so long on the Game of Thrones universe that I've stopped finding any of this weird, and I'm finding this realization a bit weird, but I digress. So yeah, the two of them got married, but so did Aegon and Rhaenys. Dude couldn't keep a lid on it. According to Westerosi history, Aegon married Visenya because it was his duty, because he had to, and he married Rhaenys because she was his desire. He wanted to. It's believed that Aegon loved spending nights with Rhaenys. People from the court always said that if Aegon spent 10 nights with Rhaenys, he would spend 1 night with Visenya. When Aegon would not spend the night with Rhaenys, she would surround herself with young and good-looking men, and they say she would also bring men to her bedchambers. So yeah, girl knew what she wanted and didn't hesitate to get it. I wonder if Aegon knew about all this. If he did, why didn't he do something about it? Anyway, it was some time before her wedding that Visenya bonded with Vhagar, the mighty she-dragon from House of the Dragon, and became a dragon rider. As I mentioned earlier, when Aegon Targaryen came to Westeros, he brought 5 dragons. 4 of these died, and only Balerion the Black Dread remained. But Aerion had also brought dragon eggs along with him, and Vhagar was one of the dragons who hatched from these eggs on Dragonstone. Even Meraxes, the dragon of Rhaenys, hatched on Dragonstone. The beginning of the Conquest. If we're to believe House of the Dragon, I mean we should, because it is canon, Aegon began his conquest in 2 BC, and must have had the dream which he later called A Song of Fire and Ice. He, along with Visenya and Rhaenys, their dragons, and some 1,600 men, arrived at the mouth of Blackwater Rush, which was surrounded by 3 hills. Aegon started the construction of Aegon Fort on the highest of these 3 hills. Although a motte and bailey fort, it became his base and was the first piece of land he claimed in the mainland Westeros. You see, Dragonstone was actually the westernmost point of the Valyrian freehold, and was not considered a part of Westeros until then. Anyway, the houses in what is now known as the Crown Lands started surrendering one by one. When House Rossby hardly put up a fight, House Stokeworth yielded only after Visenya Dracarried the hell out of the roof of Stokeworth. Soon Aegon had to face his first real test when Houses Darklyn and Moonton put up a fight. Interestingly, Visenya chose to spare Duskendale and did not burn it to the ground because she wanted the riches of the house to add to the wealth of House Targaryen, a fairly strategic move. This was a one-sided battle though, because Balerion's fire was unmatched. With this conquest, Aegon assumed the title of king. Visenya and Rhaenys became queens. The elder of the 2 queens, Visenya, placed on her brother's head a steel circlet made of Valyrian steel, while Rhaenys proclaimed him as Aegon, first of his name, king of all Westeros, and shield of his people. Watching this on screen would be amazing, and so would be watching Balerion and his supposed black dragon fire. Saving face in the battle for Gtown. After his coronation, King Aegon planned to spread his wings across Westeros, and Visenya became one of his most efficient generals in this regard. Aegon's first target was Gtown, a city of the Vale of Arryn. Aegon sent Daemon Valerion, the then Lord of Tides and Master of Ships, to take it, and Queen Visenya accompanied him on Vhagar. Arryns did their best to assemble a fleet of ships to take down the Targaryen fleet, and managed to destroy many of these because the Arryns also had at least 12 Braavosi warships. Much of the Targaryen ships came from House Valyrian, who ruled the waters, and it was surprising to see that the Arryns managed to destroy most of the Valyrian vessels. In fact, Daemon was killed. This is when Visenya descended atop Vhagar and burned down most of the Arryn fleet. Although the Targaryens did not succeed in taking Gtown and faced a strategic defeat, Visenya ensured that the Targaryen face was saved because she turned a strategic defeat into a tactical draw. Crackclaw Point. As the battle raged all across Westeros, the news from one corner flew to the other faster than dragons. Not long before Visenya arrived at Crackclaw Point, news of Harren the Black's death at the hands of Aegon and the burning of Harrenhal reached here. It had become fairly evident that the Targaryens were not to be trifled with, lest you wanted your decimation and the decimation of your house. The Crackclaws were wise to bend their knees to Queen Visenya with little to no defiance. As they finished swearing oaths of fealty, Visenya accepted them as her own men and allowed the Crackclaws to owe their loyalty directly to the crown, thereby earning the Targaryens a worthy bunch of loyalists. It is interesting that Visenya did not annihilate the house. By doing so, she ensured that the realm understood that the Targaryens were here to rule, but not to loot, plunder, or be excessively violent or dictatorial. Field of Fire. Not everyone was like the Crackclaws. Some, like the Gardeners and the Lannisters, knew how to put up a fight, and it only made sense because why would you just want to give up your rich kingdom because some foreign king came knocking at your doors? So yeah, the 2 great Western kings used common sense, merged their armies, and began their journey to face Aegon on the field. Meryn the Ninth Gardener, King of the Reach, led a mighty host from the Reach, and Loren Lannister, King of the Rock, left from Casterly Rock. They both met each other in Golden Grove. Now, this was the largest host that Westeros had ever seen, 55,000 strong, and among these men were about 5,000 knights. They didn't waste a lot of time at Golden Grove and went further on. As Aegon heard about the Western forces approaching him, he gathered his own men and marched to meet them. Queen Visenya, along with Queen Rhaenys, joined Aegon at the town of Stony Sept. You see, Visenya came here directly from Crackclaw Point, and Rhaenys had arrived from Storm's End. The three royals, their dragons, and the Targaryen army raced south. They were quicker because the Targaryens had some 11,000 men compared to the 55,000 of House Gardener and House Lannister. The battle commences in the wide-open plains south of the Blackwater Rush, where Visenya and her siblings used their dragons to set the field on fire. I'm assuming that the scene looked similar to the one where Daenerys used Drogon to burn the Lannister armies in Game of Thrones. The dry grass, the strands of wheat, the men, the horses, everything served as fuel to Dragonfire. Nearly 4,000 men died from fire alone, while several times that number were left wounded. Naturally, this battle became lodged in the history books as Field of Fire, a name that was apt and dark. In the aftermath of the battle, Meryn the Ninth Gardener, King of the Reach, died on the battlefield, while the Lannister King Loren fled from the field, which meant that the Targaryens had won the Reach as well as the Rock. Interestingly, when Visenya reached Casterly Rock and saw what it looked like, she thanked the gods that Loren chose to meet Aegon in the field. She believed that even Dragonfire would have proved inefficient in breaking the Lannister morale if the king had chosen to stay inside the rock. Also during the battle, Visenya had taken an arrow in the shoulder, but she was a resilient young woman, and it didn't take long for her to recover from the wound. After Loren bent his knee, Visenya once again parted ways with Aegon and Rhaenys, only to reunite at the banks of the Trident, where Torrhen Stark accepted Aegon as his king. Visenya then left to take care of the Vale, where House Arryn ruled. It turned out that House Arryn had buckled up their defenses manifolds in the wake of an impending Targaryen assault. Unfortunately, all the strengthened defense was ground-based, and Visenya bypassed them all by flying overhead on Vhagar to reach the Eyrie. Here, Visenya met the young King of the Mountain and Vale named Rhaenyra Arryn, whose mother and Queen Regent, Lady Shara Arryn, surrendered to Visenya. However, they had one demand. Rhaenyra wanted to ride the dragon, which Visenya agreed to. In fact, they flew 3 times around what's called the Giant's Lance. The First Dornish War, a bloody business. After conquering the Vale, Aegon and his forces marched to Old Town, but found the city gates open. It turned out that the Hightowers decided to surrender even before Aegon marched through the gates. After this, the High Septon of the Starry Sept formally crowned Aegon and proclaimed him Aegon of House Targaryen, the first of his name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, and Protector of the Realm. His reign had formally begun, but he was still one kingdom short of the Seven Kingdoms. In 4 AC, Aegon relaunched his campaign to seize control of Dorne. This marked the beginning of the First Dornish War, which also brought a great loss to the Targaryens. Queen Rhaenys and her dragon Meraxes lost their lives in 10 AC. Naturally, Aegon and Visenya began paying for blood with fire. The royal couple set every holdfast keep and castle in Dorne on fire, with the exception of Sunspear, the seat of House Martell, in the hope that it would create some degree of strife amongst the Dornish. However, the Dornish were a loyal bunch, and petty tactics did not help the Targaryen cause. Unable to make any significant progress, Visenya and Aegon placed bounties on the heads of all Dornish lords, which was retaliated upon by the Dornish, with bounties on the heads of Aegon and Visenya. The queen was attacked on several occasions. In one such instance, she defended herself with Dark Sister. In fact, she also saved Aegon's life on at least 2 occasions. Aegon argued that his guards were efficient enough to protect him, and just to prove him wrong, she drew Dark Sister and cut Aegon's cheek, all before Aegon's guards could even understand what happened. Aegon understood that he needed better men for his protection, and Visenya gave birth to the Kingsguard. She also penned down an oath that was inspired from the oath that the Brothers of the Night's Watch took before formally joining the Order. Furthermore, Visenya herself chose the first 7 members of the Kingsguard, who were to give their lives to the protection protection of the crown. Anyway, the First Dornish War went on till 13 AC, when Princess Daria Martell arrived in King's Landing with peace terms from her father. She also brought the severed head of Meraxes along with her, a gesture that boiled Visenya's blood. But Aegon ordered that Daria was not to be touched, and he heard what she had to say. After Aegon read the letter from the prince, he clenched the iron chair so hard that his hand started to bleed. Next thing we know, he burned the letter and left with Balerion, only to return the following day to announce that he had agreed to the peace terms, thus ending the First Dornish War. Maegor. When Aegon the Conqueror was busy with his kingly duties, it was often up to his wives, Visenya and Rhaenys, along with his counselors, to keep the realm steady and running smoothly. The dynamics within the royal family became extremely unstable when Rhaenys tragically died in Dorne in 10 AC. Her death deeply affected her son Aenys, sparking concerns about his frail health and capability to rule in the future. Amidst this turmoil, whispers started circulating about Visenya's fertility. After more than a decade married to Aegon without a child, rumors spread that she might be barren, and some even boldly suggested that Aegon should consider taking another wife. However, Aegon wasn't quick to jump on that idea, despite many young suitors being paraded before him. Then, in a twist of fate, Visenya announced her pregnancy in 11 AC, and by the following year, she gave birth to Aegon's second son, Maegor, at Dragonstone. Visenya didn't just stop at motherhood. She personally raised Maegor on Dragonstone, and, marking his 13th name day, she passed on her Valyrian steel sword, Dark Sister, to him, cementing her influence and legacy in her son. As Maegor grew, so did the complexities of succession. By the time Maegor was 12, Visenya was plotting a marriage between him and his niece, Prince Rhaena, to secure his position in line for the throne after Aenys. However, this plan hit a roadblock when the High Septon pushed back, proposing his niece, Lady Cerys Hightower, as a more suitable match for the young prince. Throughout all of this, Visenya's relationship with Aegon grew colder. When Aegon decided to replace the Aegon fort with the Red Keep in 35 AC, he tasked Visenya with overseeing the construction at King's Landing, perhaps more out of a desire to keep her occupied and out of Dragonstone than out of trust in her leadership. This move by Aegon hinted at the underlying tensions and the less-than-warm bond between the two, as noted by Archmaester Gildane in his histories. Seizing the throne. When Aegon the Conqueror passed away, the fiery Visenya and her son Maegor led the cremation. Now, this was also a turning point for Aenys the First Targaryen because he took the crown. In the beginning itself, Aenys handed Maegor the legendary sword Blackfire, which was a sign that Maegor was better suited for its weight. I mean, Aenys was still not strong enough to wield a sword as strong and mighty as Blackfire. However, Queen Visenya interpreted this as Aenys admitting his own lack of backbone for kingship. By 39 AC, Maegor married for a second, Alysanne Haraway, in a ceremony led by none other than Visenya herself, due to the absence of a willing Septon. This didn't sit well with the realm, and Maegor found himself exiled. Not long after, at the wedding of Princess Rhaena to Prince Aegon, King Aenys granted Aegon the title of Prince of Dragonstone, Maegor's former title. Displeased and undeterred, Visenya left the celebrations early and returned to Dragonstone on her dragon Vhagar, under a moon that singers later claimed turned red as she flew past. The Faith Militant uprising soon threw the realm into chaos. As King Aenys floundered at the helm, fleeing to Dragonstone, Visenya didn't mince words. She advised him to take drastic measures against the Faith by burning their sanctuaries. But Aenys, paralyzed by indecision, fell ill instead. Visenya then took it upon herself to nurse him back to health, and for a time, it seemed to work. However, Aenys' condition worsened drastically when he heard his children were under siege at Crakehall, leading to his death just 3 days later. With no time to waste, Visenya swiftly buried Aenys and then mounted Vhagar, soaring off to Pentos to bring Maegor back from his exile. Visenya's relentless spirit and fierce determination shaped much of the Targaryen rule during these tumultuous times. With Visenya at his side, Maegor seized the Iron Throne, a coup stamped with his mother's fierce determination. Once they reached King's Landing, Visenya silenced anyone doubting Maegor's claim. This defiance led to a brutal trial of 7, pitting Maegor against the warrior's sons. Though Maegor emerged as the lone survivor, he was gravely wounded in the duel. Enforcing Maegor's rule by fire and blood. By 42 AC, Visenya was back in action, flying her dragon Vhagar to Driftmark to persuade Dowager Queen Alyssa Velaryon, Aenys' widow, to abandon her refuge since her husband's death. At court, rumors buzzed that Maegor's real influencers were a trio of powerful women: his mother Visenya, his second wife and favorite, Alice Haraway, and his new third wife, the mysterious Tyanna of the Tower from Pentos, who was reputed to be a sorceress. Tensions rose as Visenya grew suspicious of Tyanna, which in turn led to a degree of strife and rivalry. In 43 AC, Visenya showed her unyielding nature once more. She mounted Vhagar and set off across the Riverlands, only to torch the ancestral seats of those nobles who ignored Maegor's summons. Her targets included the House of Tarek, Blaintree, Leicester, Deadings, and Wayne. Now, this was basically a grim reminder of the ruthless tactics she once employed in Dorne. This fierce and fiery campaign solidified Visenya not just as a dragon rider, but as a relentless enforcer of her son's dominion. You could say that leaving scorched earth and awe in her wake came easy to Visenya. Visenya and Maegor ramped up the pressure on Old Town, and even threatened to torch the Starry Sept after the High Septon blasted her son's multiple marriages. The situation diffused when the High Septon unexpectedly passed away, and Lord Martin Hightower seized the chance to open the city gates, sparing Old Town from destruction. Visenya watched with a steely gaze as the new High Septon crowned her son, affirming his rule. After Maegor's strategic triumph at the Battle Beneath the God's Eye, it was Visenya who convinced him to show mercy, and persuaded him to spare several highborn rebels instead of executing them. Following Prince Aegon's death, she took a firm hand in securing the future as she held Alyssa and her young children, Jaehaerys and Alysanne, under her vigilant watch on Dragonstone. By 44 AC, despite her robust appearance in battle just a year earlier, Visenya's health had sharply declined, her once formidable frame now frail and worn. She passed away that year while Maegor was away on a military campaign. Amid the ensuing chaos, Alyssa seized the moment to escape the castle with her children and Visenya's cherished blade, Dark Sister. Following Targaryen tradition, Visenya was cremated. Her remains were laid to rest next to her brother, King Aegon I, leaving a legacy of power, fear, and respect that shaped the course of Targaryen history. So yeah, that was Visenya Targaryen for you. With news that there might be a Game of Thrones spin-off on Aegon's conquest of Westeros, it would be fun to watch all of these events brought to life. Until such time, we stay content with the fact that characters like Visenya exist. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.